Hello, and welcome to Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg. We're here to explore the imposter syndrome that haunts creatives, delving into how it affects their lives and work. Join us as we chat with authors and artists about creativity, self doubt, featuring imposter characters in their stories, and the occasional imposter who pops up in their day to day lives.
And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Samantha Downing to the show. Samantha is an internationally best-selling thriller author whose books have appeared on the Sunday Times and USA Today bestseller lists. Her novels include My Lovely Wife, He Started It, For Your Own Good, and A Twisted Love Story. Her debut novel, My Lovely Wife, was nominated for Edgar, ITW, and Macavity Awards in the US, the CWA Award in the UK, and was the winner of the Prix des Lectrices Award in France. Her latest thriller, Too Old for This, was released in August 2025. Samantha, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. This is such a treat on many levels, and we're just back, as we were talking about, from our summer hiatus. And I think both Greg and I were so excited when we found out that Too Old for This was coming out, because we are just huge fans of yours. But I think I want to start by saying, and I don't know if you know this, Samantha, we actually were directly affected by your first book, My Lovely Wife. We were published by the same publisher, different imprints. And our first book, The Woman Inside, came out the same season as My Lovely Wife. And we got a phone call. Greg, tell me if my math is wrong on this. Like, leading up to publication, and our first title of our book was The Last Wife. And they were saying, the sales force at Penguin Random House was saying, you know, we love the book and we love the title, but there's this other thriller coming out with a very similar title. And it would be really helpful for booksellers and for the sales force if you guys could maybe reconsider the title. And we were like, oh, okay, that's a twist. And we retitled, and we're actually really happy, I can say confidently, with that new title. But that's how we found out about you and your incredible first novel. So we're publishing siblings, and indirectly you influenced the title of our first novel, which, you know, we both love the title. But more importantly, that book it's so good. And I'm just wondering, you know, you're now 5 books later, how much that experience of having your debut come out and just be so big so quickly and so well received, how that influenced every book thereafter. And does this process of publishing a book and having the rollout, does that change or get any easier, stay the same? Is it harder with each book?
Well, I knew so little about publishing as a business when I started with, when I had got my contract, and I was just happy to have an agent, let alone a book contract. And then it sort of just took off from there. And I didn't know enough to know what to expect or what it meant. I didn't know enough to know that could be a one-off and that I might never have a book that big again. And I didn't even I didn't know enough to know that My Lovely Wife put me in a specific type of brand that I had to continue to write in, which is sort of this crazy, that, can I curse on here?
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Okay. Like that batshit crazy thriller with humor elements and, you know, sort of told from a villain protagonist. And I didn't know any of that. So to me, it was just a thriller. It was, I didn't break it down into another subgenre and another subgenre. So everything that happened was a surprise from beginning to end. From even getting the agent, it was a surprise, and getting a book contract and then having it get so much attention and then sell so much. I thought writing, this is where I went very wrong, was like any other career in which you start where you start and you build from there. And I guess I just have had normal jobs all my life, where you have a job and you get a promotion and you get a raise, and then you work and then you get another promotion and you get a raise. It's not like that in writing. I was
Nope.
wholly unprepared for all of it. I don't have anything to compare it to, so I don't know what it's like to have a book come out that doesn't sell as well, and then you really do get to build off of that and build your audience. To date, My Lovely Wife is still my best-selling book, and I've had 4 other books come out. Well, one just came out, so I guess we don't know for sure until we have some time go by on whether it will continue to sell or what have you. But it's an aggravating and very frustrating to try to compete with yourself and try to compete with your own sales. I'm not competing with anybody else. I'm trying to beat my own sales just to see if I can, level up in my own career.
Right.
So I don't know if that answered your question, but all I could say is total lack of preparation or lack of knowledge in how any of it worked when it started.
Right. Well, I guess we all kind of are in that boat of not knowing what we know, or not knowing what we don't know, rather. Right.
Exactly.
And to your point, it really is. I mean, we talk about that a bit on the podcast, that idea of there's not really a predictable trajectory in this industry at all. I mean, it can be an arc, it can be, rocky, it can be a swoop, it can be kind of any number of things. With your book, Fresh Out in the World, could you give our listeners a little bit of a rundown on Too Old for This? Kind of how the book came about.
Yeah, Too Old for This is about a 75-year-old retired serial killer named Lottie Jones. And she's really enjoying her life as a retiree and has a social circle and has a child and grandkids and family. And someone knocks on her door threatening to blow up her quiet little life and threatening to expose her, basically. And time to come out of retirement, apparently.
Love that. You also, one of the things I really love about this, it's an unorthodox premise for a story to begin with, but also you really use it as this wonderful kind of entryway to explore a lot of issues affecting older adults. You touch on, there's predatory lending, the medical and pharmaceutical industries, financial security, retirement living, all those kind of things. What kind of drew you to dig into those topics in the book?
Well, I definitely wanted to present her as a whole person and not just a mom. She had this whole life, and those are all aspects of being 75 years old. And so she had a complete life and was a complete person. She also was very good at compartmentalizing her activities and, her family here and the killing here and they do not cross and that kind of thing. So it wouldn't have been right to not include it, because if you're going to have a serial killer protagonist, people have to be able to relate to them in some way. Otherwise, they're just a monster and they're just a cardboard character. Right. So for Lottie, it was important to bring in the rest of her life and see her as a human being, because I wasn't writing a monster. The same thing is done with Dexter. And Dexter becoming a father. And if you watch that show or read the books, his life progresses even as he's still killing. Right. So otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the many things you do really well, and it appears to be effortlessly done, and I know that's not the case from being on both sides of the reading experience and writing experience, but the empathy that I found myself having with Lottie. And, I think that's a real hat trick to, I think we all encounter this as thriller writers where we're writing about murder, especially, these kind of horrific, unimaginable acts, both inserting levity into it and humor, which you do in, I think, all of your books, but then to have empathy for this character and her evolution. And I was wondering, I think that senior citizens are so underrepresented in literature in general, but then in thrillers, I would be hard pressed to name any with protagonists like over the age of 50 or 60, and certainly women over the age. And then you also have very few serial killers on record are women, so I think when people have written about them, they've been mostly trying to, I don't know, emulate Thomas Harris. you know so I'm wondering, on both accounts, that's a lot of risk taking, talking about the business of publishing, right? And not feeling like competing with yourself. And how do you decide and then confirm, like, okay, I'm going to write about, a woman who's 75 and a woman serial killer? Because you're kind of doing something really new. Was that scary?
Yeah, I was lucky that there have been a few books recently with older protagonists that are sleuths or amateur detectives, like Richard Osman, Deanna Raybourn have written books, and that sort of has become popular. And otherwise, I don't know that it would have been approved by my editor when I pitched it. That there was sort of a track record, that there was an audience for older protagonists, even though they weren't serial killers, they were still older protagonists. And of course, this has been done. I mean, Agatha Christie did it with Miss Marple. So it has been done at times, and it's going through a wave of popularity now. So she was really excited about it, and my agent was really excited about it. And, that's what I kind of like to do, is take something that's more common, like the older person sleuth, and just turn it upside down. And have them be the killer instead of the detective character or amateur detective or whatever. So it's just how I try to do something different, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things I want to just loop back for a quick second. You talked a few minutes ago about sort of getting now into this zone that you work in where you feature these villain protagonists. And one of the things that I think always make your characters so memorable is you're able to strike that perfect balance in terms of sort of narrative irony and cognitive dissonance within the character, where they do things that are, objectively kind of morally bad, but they still manage to feel completely justified in their actions. And I think then that helps that translate to the reader. Teddy from For Your Own Good, I think, is a great example of that. And I think Lottie, you do beautifully the same thing with that. Could you talk about walking that particular kind of tightrope, writing a character?
Yeah, for this book, it is Lottie is the narrator for the whole book. There are no other narrators, so that you're really in her head the whole time. And that was a deliberate decision. For Your Own Good was a little different, but in both cases, for both Teddy and Lottie, they both had very specific belief systems about what they did, and they did not question them. It just, things had to be done, and they just had to do it. There was no, and they have reasons for what they did in the past, especially Lottie for her past. She had reasons for what she did, and she didn't question whether it was right or wrong. It was right to her. So I think as long as you can get a reader in their head, they may not agree with the actions, but they might agree with the reasons. And that really happened with Teddy a lot. That I had teachers contact me saying, I feel exactly as like Teddy does about entitled kids.
Right.
I just don't agree with what he did about it, So, but his reasoning behind it was something people could understand, that these kids can be entitled brats, and somebody needs to teach them a lesson. He just chose a very different way of teaching that lesson. And so for Lottie, she really comes from a place of being a woman who's been judged all her life. And it's that judgment that really sets her off. And women are just judged all the time for how they act, how they look. Are they likable? Are they unlikable? What have you? And sometimes it just gets to her. And in that moment, you don't want to be around. So I think that it's, I think that's the key for me to staying in the character, is that they don't question it, just to develop what their belief system is. And they don't sit around thinking about the morality of it. I'm not pandering to a reader that knows serial killing is wrong. We all know serial killing is wrong. There's no need to discuss it. They do what they do, period. And they have their reasons for doing it.
Right. I think part of the magic trick about your books is that there's something so cathartic about that, because you always have some framework. For instance, you mentioned the entitled, kids at this sort of upper crust private school in For Your Own Good, or Lottie having to deal with being a woman of a certain age and having to navigate, sexism and sort of ageism and all of these things. So you set this beautiful framework for the character having this thing to push back against. And I think that kind of also helps to justify whatever that personal moral code is, or that kind of frame of ethics or whatever it is. Do you go in? I'm sorry. Please.
I was just going to say, yeah, and I think that that's an important point too. Lottie doesn't feel the need to justify her actions to the reader. Right. You're just along for the ride. And so she's not saying, this is why I do this. This is here's my reasoning. It just comes out in how the stories that she tells. So in no way is Lottie trying to convince a reader that she's right. She's just telling a story, and you're along for the ride.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that narrative kind of intention really works. I mean, at least my experience was when I was reading it, I didn't have any judgment either way about her making decisions to kill or not kill. It was more like she needs to find solutions. She is dealing with like everyday problems. She's, has a lot of justifiable rage, and this is just how she does it. And that for me, it felt like the serial killing, while it was like a really compelling hook, it wasn't what actually the story became about. This was like a woman's life and all of the challenges, motherhood, single motherhood, the things she had, experienced in her young life, everything leading up to this time, and then trying to figure out how she wanted to age, like what did that look like? And, it was like kind of like the killing became secondary, or not killing. And I'm just wondering if when you were writing it, did you have to kind of consciously balance like let me rephrase, was there a serial killer story or trope or formula you felt pressured to kind of like integrate, or were you just kind of going on your own flow?
No, I was, there wasn't a particular one. No, Lottie doesn't, unlike a lot of serial killers, she doesn't have a particular profile of the type of victim that she kills. It can be men, women, the age doesn't matter. And in this particular story, she's killing people that threaten her to blow up the life that she has. So she has a very specific mission throughout this story. But her serial killing in the past, it could have been anybody. It just depends on when they cross her and what mood she's in, and if there's opportunity. She was very good at spotting when the times she could get away with it, feasibly get away with it. Because really, when you're a serial killer, it's not about the killing, it's about getting away with it. That's the part you have to master. Right. And the part that's so difficult today with technology and whatnot, as Lottie discovers. So there was no actual, like, a serial killer model I was using for inspiration. She's wholly of my imagination.
Well, speaking of your sort of narrative imagination, I think one of my favorite things of your novels is there's always this really compelling narrative voice that I think hooks a reader early. And you've written at this point from a very wide range of POVs, or close thirds. But what is your kind of, as you mentioned earlier, for instance, like you always tend to utilize humor as a kind of a way into that voice. Do you have any sort of particular tricks for like keying into whatever that particular character is for that story? Any like way in?
Not in any particular tricks. I don't do any plotting or outlining or character profiles. So I have to discover the voice as I write. And that can take, I have to kind of write about 20,000 words to know if I have something. One, if I have a story that's big enough for a book. And two, if it takes me about that long to really get to know the character. And sometimes I have to readjust to the first chapters to that voice. But I really learn the story by actually writing it. I can't sit down and like think it through. The way like a chess player can think 20 moves ahead. I have to write, and then I get more ideas as I write, and then another idea will come to me. And then the more I write, the more ideas come to me. And if they stop coming to me, then that's not my book. I have to put it away, because then I'm just struggling to know what to do with it. So as far as the humor, I'm like a really sarcastic person. So a lot of it are just like one-liners that I think of, and
Yeah.
sometimes the character ends up snarky because of that. But I'm
Bring on the
actually not
snark.
trying to be, I'm genuinely not trying to be funny, but I think that in general, I don't write books that are bleak.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about a serial killer of any age, there are a lot of bleak serial killer books out there, and they're very serious, and they take the victims very seriously, and it's just a completely different kind of book. Mine is lighter and has humor to it, and it's not, I don't think any of my books are dark and depressing or anything like that.
Right. Right.
I agree with that. Well, I'm wondering along the lines of process with writing a serial killer book. I know this when we talked to Clemence McCollin about The Quiet Tenant. We were talking quite a bit about all of the research going into that. And I have a serial killer novel that's like in the desk that may or may not ever live to see the light of day. And I know in the course of that, I've gotten very much, stuck in the rabbit hole of research. And I'm wondering, in your experience, did you do a lot of research? Did you, do you research in general, or does that hinder you?
I research certain aspects of it that are going to be the kind of thing readers will notice if it's wrong. So, particularly on the science and the technology side, we can write fictional stories, but only to a point. If you're not writing a sci-fi novel, you kind of have to stay in this world of science or this world of technology.
Yeah.
So I did ask, there's actually a mystery writers conference that I go to here in the Bay Area every year, and they have a panel of experts. And last year when I was in edits for this book, I went, they have a cyber expert, they have lawyers, they have judges, they have a forensic pathologist. I went with like a list of questions to get the technology right and the pathology right of certain methods that Lottie uses. I went through those methods step by step with a forensic pathologist to make sure that it wasn't too unbelievable. And it may sound unbelievable, but it's not. But I don't want to spoil anything.
Right. No, I don't.
But in terms of this, especially technology, it's impossible to write a thriller now without having technology somewhere in it, or phones or camera. I mean, it's everywhere. So unless it's a locked room mystery where you've lost power or you've lost technology, it has to be somewhere in the story. I mean, at some level, phone records even. And the key is to really weave that in without getting bogged down in tech, because it's not a tech thriller. So nobody wants to read all those nitty gritty things. So like for Lottie, she has a standing rule to leave the phone at home. That way she doesn't have to deal with it, doesn't have to do the location services, the Wi-Fi, the turning on, the turning off, the taking the SIM card out. Just don't carry it.
Yeah.
Over. And that's done. And then so I don't want to get too bogged down in the real life details, but I want to make it realistic for someone who's reading it. Because I know when I'm watching a show or reading a book, it particularly happens in TV, and I think just they have a time factor there. Every time something happens regarding a crime, I'm always like, oh, well, that car has GPS. That's really easy. All they need to do is go get the GPS for that car because it exists. Or just go look at the person's phone records. Their location is going to show them there. So and readers do that more often because they're looking for those kind of things. TV shows, we kind of just let it go by and okay, that's just part of the show. Readers aren't so forgiving.
No, not at all. They all have master's degrees in criminology. It's like, and what's really remarkable is, you're honoring the necessity for technology and like logic in committing a crime. But then your character, who's 75, you're also, it's like, I don't know if it was indirect commentary on how much more challenging it is for people over a certain age to navigate how quickly technology evolves and changes. People who weren't born with all of this technology, like especially smartphones, they're confounding for people who are like my age. So you take someone who grew up in a totally different technological environment, and that layer is really fascinating, that she's kind of forced to adapt to current technology because she's a serial killer and she needs to be able to like get away with it. And I just keep thinking about like all of these kind of thematic ciphers you have with like female rage and technology and surveillance and ageism, and then even like she's an aging parent whose son is getting married to someone she may or may not like. Like these are all very real things that I found myself really enjoying considering in a different spectrum. I also wanted to add that there's a whole kind of part where she's trying to figure out where she's going to live for the rest of her life. And I found that extremely poignant, and I'm wondering if these are things that you were thinking about before you started writing the book, or were they things that as you were writing the book, you were like, okay, what is this person at this point in their life going to be considering?
Well, to me, I try to incorporate very serious elements in my book, whether the people see them or not. So for like, I try to have a top-down look at what my book is about. When I look at My Lovely Wife, to me, that book is a thriller about marriage. And that's how I would describe it. It's not just a thriller. I'm saying something about marriage, and I'm using serial killing to say it. That's the same with this book. When I look at this book, this is a thriller about aging. And I am using serial killing to tell a story about an aging woman. So that may not be how people market it or how it's described, but when I'm writing the book, that's how I think about it, is her, think of a 75-year-old person, not a serial killer, having to return to work for some purpose, whatever their job was, and having to adjust to a new world, being back in the workforce. That's basically what she's doing. I've just taken it to the extreme and made it serial killing.
Right.
And then that makes, and suspense is in it, and people are after her, and this and that and the other, and it becomes a thriller. But essentially, to me, when I'm writing it, that's why those elements end up in the story, because in my mind, that's the story I'm telling.
Right. Well, that raises a question. Actually, I'm curious about now. So you mentioned that you go in, you're what we kind of refer to as a pantser. You kind of go in with that, and you sort of find the story as you go. Do you have a sense up front of like maybe themes that have been on your mind that you want to kind of get to in the book, or do those organically sort of jump out as the story builds?
Both. It develops as it goes. So I might have some ideas in my head, but then the more I write, the more things come to me. And for Lottie, she's getting to that age where she's almost the average lifespan of a woman in the US. Right. So then you have to think, how long am I going to be around for? How much money do I need to be able to either live or move, as she's thinking of doing? Should I stay in a big house by myself, especially a woman by herself? Yeah. What happens if she dies? Who's going to find her? If you live by yourself and you don't have people coming by every day, do you think about these things? Sure. So for her, I was really trying to look at it from her point of view. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people her age who do not want to think about that stuff at all and never consider it, and just know I'm not going to even admit to myself that I'm that close to the average lifespan. Like, I'm not thinking of that. So I think different people obviously deal with these things in different ways. Lottie is a little more head on like, okay, here's the average lifespan and how long, she's ready to calculate it out and estimate, but not everybody would.
Right. Well, that right there is a really interesting way of where you will take, as you mentioned before, you'll take sort of a convention or a trope of the genre and you'll flip it, right? Like with Lottie, there's a ticking clock at play, but it's not the way that, an author would normally employ a ticking clock into a thriller narrative. Do you know what I mean? But it's interesting, and it has its own kind of friction and its own kind of tension as you do. Yeah.
That's what I try to do.
Yeah.
You succeed.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I would love, because I don't know a lot about your kind of writing origin myth. Were you always a writer? Did you always want to be a novelist? You mentioned early on in the interview that you kind of didn't know that you were like writing into a particular genre. So have you always wanted to write thrillers? Tell us, when it started for you.
Yeah, I was always a big reader, and I think that led me to eventually want to write my own stories. But thrillers were definitely something I read. Thrillers and mysteries were always around my house. My family were big readers. So early on, I was reading John Grisham, Michael Crichton, Clive Cussler, just lots of thrillers everywhere. And I think that genre really got into my head. I liked it. And early mysteries, of course, too. Nancy Drew, Encyclopedia Brown, the very early reading. And I did write. I wrote as a hobby, and very early in my 20s, I looked into getting published, and I didn't have a degree in it. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a pedigree. I wasn't published in any magazine. And when I looked into it, it just felt impossible. Like, you got to get an agent, you have to get this, you have to like explain all your writing credits and your query letter. And I was like, oh, well, clearly that's never going to happen. So I just really wrote as a hobby. I mean, the same way people do anything for a hobby, the same way some people learn how to play the guitar. And then they don't think they're going to be standing in Madison Square Garden. They just do it because they like it. So that's what I did. And I joined a writing group in New Orleans, and that was really interesting. That actually, I think, accelerated my right, because I was really writing in a void. The only people that ever read it were some friends and family, and barely anybody. People get tired of it, and so they would. I didn't really have any objective readers until I joined a writers group, and that was really enlightening to see people give me feedback who just they didn't know what my intentions were with the story. They were just giving me what they got out of it, which might be completely different than the way I meant something. And it was through that writers group that I was writing My Lovely Wife, and someone in the group really loved it, and she knew somebody who went to high school with somebody who became an agent in New York, and she sent it to him and said, send it to your friend. And he represented nonfiction books, but he contacted me and he said to send it to Barbara, he said, I've told her about this book. She's waiting for it. Send it to her. And I did. And then she became my agent. And then she saw it, like in a month, my whole life changed. Wow. So, and I had a contract. And so I was like, I just was so overwhelmed by it. I was like, I just said yes. I was like, okay, yes, you're my agent, and yes, Penguin Random House, and yes, okay, here we go. Yeah, and having no idea like what, I didn't even know I had to go through an editing process. Like, that's how dumb I was. Like, had no idea there were stages of revision and multiple revisions, and didn't know any of it. Just so
this begs the question. I mean, here we are half an hour into Imposter Hour, but were you feeling imposter syndrome at that point or any point?
Yeah, I mean, I always do, especially now. I mean, there was such a hype with My Lovely Wife that it was like, I think for a while I was kind of like, wow, I'm better than I thought I was. Like, everybody really loves this book. It'll be so easy just to write another. There's just, this is, yeah. So yeah, you crash down to earth pretty quickly. My second book came out in the middle of the pandemic and blah, 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 and was totally different. If I had known I was putting together a brand, I might have written a completely different book that's centered around, maybe I would have written a sequel to My Lovely Wife. I don't know. But if I had known it had to be that kind of particular thriller that I was supposed to be writing, it all could have turned, if I sat down and defined a brand, it might have turned out differently. I might not, my second book might have been different. My third book might have been different. I mean, I could have focused on like love relationships the whole time, or I mean, who knows? But I didn't, the whole branding thing of like not just branded as a thriller, but a specific type of thriller. I did not know about that.
Yeah. Which is remarkable to me because, we've had a lot of guests on this show, but then just out in the wild, people who write in the kind of domestic suspense, domestic thriller space that we all have written in or continue to write in, like people will say directly, like, I knew exactly what I was writing into, or even go as further to say, like, I wanted to write the next Gone Girl. So it's just a really interesting thing. I think this experience of people who are very like, kind of calculating about writing into a genre. And then those of us who were like, I'm just writing kind of what I'm moved to write. And I think I can speak for myself, but I think Greg agrees, we've had a very similar trajectory as you have, with the first book having like a really big launch and a lot of, attention around it and it being really exciting. And then writing a second book and then having it go right into the pandemic. And the just, it was such an extreme. It feels like, with our follow-up books too, in some sense, I don't really know that I experienced them fully for what the books themselves were, because it was so much about like living up to the first launch, and in the book that came out during the pandemic, it's like, well, how is anyone going to hear about any book, and and then of course there were all of these incredible book folks who like started to move and do online events and book clubs and continue to do the good work of publicizing and marketing books. But it was still really hard. I don't know when your second book came out exactly, but Greg, ours came out like pretty much right when things were closing down, right?
Well, yeah, and we actually did. I'm remembering Samantha, we did a virtual event with you through, I think it was Fairfield University, right? Craig Kennedy put one together, and we were on there, and that was right around, so I think both of our books had come out right around that same time. And we're trying to kind of, fish ourselves out of that void. But yeah, that begs a question. So, you come out, you have this kind of moonshot of a debut, and you are kind of realizing as all this is happening that you're now in kind of this subgenre of thriller. How did you, what was the headspace around that idea of having to like adjust to this kind of, this new life? As you said, your life changed in a very short period of time, and then having to kind of figure out how to adjust to like working in a particular mode.
Yeah. For my writing, it was a huge adjustment because I had spent 20 years writing whatever I wanted to write. It didn't have to be any genre. I could stop, I could start. That was kind of the draw to it, was like I had complete freedom in my writing. It was my little kingdom, one. And so now now I was here. I had here, and now I'm here. And so it was very frustrating. And like, just to make that transition of like, okay, now you can write and it's your job, but here. So it was hard to just make the mental adjustment to like, okay, stay on brand. And that's what readers want to read from you. They don't want to see something else. They want the crazy stuff and the serial killer protagonist and the this and the that. And so that's just what it is. And there seems to be no changing that. It is what it is. And if they sell, it definitely stays there where it is. Then they definitely don't want anything else. So I have written other things, but it's more just like for myself. They're not batshit crazy books. So so I don't know. We'll see. I keep branching out on my own time, I've written some stuff like in YA, and I have, there was like a speculative fiction one I tried to write, which was totally different. But nothing that's really been successful enough that I would Nothing I don't think that anybody would want. So
Well, I
Do you
would
ever?
like to lobby for some YA speculative
Sure.
fiction, either
Yeah.
or together. Just I'm open, Samantha. I will read whatever you write.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I did actually write an entire YA book before I was published. It was terrible, but the idea was solid. The writing was not, but it was an early. She was like a 16-year-old serial killer, or
Nice.
on
Wow.
the verge. She was on the verge because you have to kill 3 to be a serial killer.
Right.
She had killed 2.
Ooh.
So she was on the precipice trying to make the decision on whether she wanted to be a serial killer.
I mean,
It's
this
exciting.
sounds like the seeds for Lottie. Like this, the,
Yeah, it
just
might have been
Right.
the prequel.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, does it, when you go off now on these sort of excursions, when you're the projects where you are writing for yourself and, you're not necessarily thinking toward publication, do you find things writing in other modes that you do end up kind of bringing back to the published novels?
Sometimes there might be a character or something that I particularly like that I think, oh, I love this character so much. I want them to be somewhere.
Yeah.
But not too much anything else. I try to keep it pretty separate in my head because I do, like, even my day is divided into, like, when I write new stuff is very early in the morning. And then when my brain gets tired and I can't make up anything else, I can switch over to revisions and take a break and then switch to revisions and stuff like that. I can do any time of the day, but I really only write fresh stuff early, like as soon as I get up in the morning.
Yeah. Same.
I'd never heard anyone say it like that, but that's so beautiful. Like you're at a point where your brain can't make any new stuff up, and that's such a real thing. There are different, I think, like modes or phases of like brain power in writers. And yeah, I think it's a really good thing to say and even talk about a little bit because I think a lot of writers, both just starting out and many, who've written multiple books and certainly myself, like sometimes it feels like it's writer's block, but it may just be like creative fatigue. Maybe it's like, okay, go edit something or revise or, it's so how do you, being that you are self-taught as so many of us are, how have you learned those things about yourself? Is that just a trial and error? You said you had a writer's group. Have you ever, taken any classes? Like, how have you learned?
Yeah, it's definitely just trial and error. I've never taken any classes. I kind of have just the books that I love, I read them and try to figure out how writers did what they did and sort of try to deconstruct in how it was done. But I don't even follow like beat sheets or anything like that. I literally just write. And if it's wrong and it's bad, sometimes I can tell it's bad and it never gets turned in and I throw it out anyway. But my agent will tell me, "Oh no, you missed the mark on this one. Go try again." So I do think that from reading so many thrillers, you get the rhythm of it in your head. And I think that comes out when I write. I used to write before I went to work, and that's where the early morning thing comes in. And I do believe that your body and your brain like routine. So if you eat at the same time every day, you're going to get hungry at that time every day because your body is going to know that it gets food at that time.
Right.
So, and I think the same is true for your brain. My brain knows it's going to write in the morning and it's prepared for that. If I tried to do it late at night, it would not come out well. And for me, writer's block is not a thing because I can't move ahead unless I write. I can't think my way to there. Like writing is how I get there. So even if I'm writing something bad or something that feels wrong, it will get me to somewhere that's right. And I will think, oh, okay, now I see why that was wrong because this is a much better idea. So I might end up deleting what I wrote that day and going in another direction, but I wouldn't have got there if I hadn't written it anyway. So sometimes when I just force it out and I'll get to a better place.
When you're in those earlier stages, when you're kind of figuring out if you have a story on your hands that's going to have legs, right? Do you have and maybe it's different for each book, but does it tend to do you tend to lock in to a character? does it tend to be like where sort of the plot starts to come together into something that feels tangible and feels like it's compelling, or is it kind of a combo of the two? What's the thing that kind of sticks first?
At 20,000 words, I have to see multiple paths ahead.
Okay.
The story has to be able to open up to enable it to be 85 or 90,000 words.
Right.
If at 20,000 words, I'm not creatively getting enough ideas to move forward, it's never going to be a 90,000 word book or an 80,000 word book. So sometimes at 20,000 words, I'm like, I don't even know where to go with this. But if it's a book, a book that does work, I will see multiple ways I could go. Well, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. So let me just try and see which one works. And then I know I've got a story that's big enough to fill a whole book.
Okay. Now that brings us to another project of yours. Aside from your novels, you also have a novella, Sleeping Dogs Lie. Was that a sort of a situation where you realized in the process that was just going to be more of a compact story as you were writing? Was that
one? I had the idea for it, and I thought it could be. I did that during the pandemic, and I think I just had the idea of a very compact story that it's about 20,000 words.
Right.
And 20,000 words is a big turning point not just for my books, but not just for determining whether it is a book, but I almost always have some sort of twist or reveal at 20,000 words.
Yep.
So for me, that story could be 20,000 words. It could also be a book. I mean, that could have gone on and other things could have happened for sure in that story. But for that particular, it was like a condensed little sort of mystery thriller in 20,000 words. And I knew I could end it there. And it would work as a novella just for something different and to have something out there that was on Audible. So the Audible was doing like a lot of short fiction at the time. I don't know if they still are, but it was a lot of, there were a lot of people, because it was the pandemic and people were at home, and there was a lot more, just more content, I guess.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
I wanted to ask, with our last few minutes, you have been doing so much publicity for Too Old for This, and it's been so exciting to see. And I'm wondering, just hearing you talk about your writing process and the craft of it all, it seems like you really love writing, and I'm wondering how you feel about promoting and being out there in the world, because it's a totally different part of your brain and personality and all of that. So is that a part of the job you like?
It's not my favorite. I mean, I would rather be writing. At one point in my life, I was in sales. I worked at an antique store selling, and it was sort of like I had to be on, but that is a conversation that is, when you're blatantly selling in a retail store, that's a transactional conversation. You're not making chit chat at a party or having to, fake being social. You're literally having a transactional conversation, and you're trying to sell something and they're trying to buy something. But I sort of, I think I draw from that in having to try to talk about my book and talk about myself and talk about my writing, which is all very strange because I'm used to, sitting in a room by myself with a computer and would rather be there because I am an introvert. So it is difficult, and I didn't do a big tour for this book. I'm going to be at BoucherCon this week, and that's like really I've been to Thriller Fest once, which was when My Lovely Wife came out before the pandemic, and it was completely overwhelming to me. So I try my best.
I relate on
I like being able to talk about it, but it's also, it can be, it's more draining than writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's funny. When Liz and I were at Thriller Fest together last year, and we kind of said that we kept joking. We're like, it's you throw a bunch of introverts into a room together for 3 days, and about halfway through day 2, everyone's just kind of flagging at the same time. You kind of see everyone's energy drop, and they're all kind of, But it really is an interesting thing. I would love to, on the way out, ask you, now that you are where you are in your career and you've kind of come into it sort of trial by fire, so to speak, with the first book, and now kind of figuring your way out through this now 5 books in, what kind of advice maybe would you give to someone who is hoping to be a debut and is kind of trying to figure out some of that industry stuff and getting themselves onto maybe some sort of a writing schedule or just some sort of a routine?
I think my first piece of advice would be to make sure you actually love to write. And I have a lot of people, as I'm sure all writers do, a lot of people say, I was thinking of writing a book, or I had this idea for a book, but so few people actually sit down and actually write it because it's really hard. And so first, if you're already writing and you found you love it, great. But if you're only thinking about being a writer or you haven't done it much, sit down and write for several hours every day for like a month. And then if you still love it, keep going. If you don't love it, there's probably a better way to express yourself out there. Because if you hate the act of writing, this is not the place for you because you have to do it a lot.
Yeah.
So if you get past that and you decide that you do love it, I mean, I can only speak from my experience, which was to concentrate on the craft. And that's what I did. I obviously didn't learn anything about the industry itself. I learned only about teaching myself the craft.
Right.
And at that point, maybe then go to some conferences and meet other writers and get more information than I had.
Yeah.
But don't try to move you can't rush the craft stage. I mean, I was just lucky that the stars aligned, that when somebody sent a book to a agent of mine, it wasn't book number 5 because that one was terrible. It was book number 12. And I had something that somebody actually thought was worth publishing because the first 10 would not have been. So it was just, and that marriage thrillers were popular. So it all hit at the same time. And I was lucky. I could have written something. I don't know that if I had written too old for this, as back in 2019, it would have gotten published.
Yeah.
I don't know that would have been something that people would have been interested in back before Richard Osman, before that it might have been seen as too risky to have an older woman in as a protagonist like that. Right. Who knows?
Right.
No, I from having been in publishing at that time and on the other side of the desk making decisions, I don't know that it would have been, and it's, I think, a really good sign in many ways that maybe the industry is becoming more open-minded and inclusive with plots. I think probably, like you said, it has to do with if the one starts to work, then everyone in publishing wants to get the next and the next. But I want to, before we close, I just want to underscore something that you're saying, because I think that there's this like fallacy when you have like a debut that does really well, like yours did, that it's like an overnight success. But you had actually been writing for a very long time and you had written multiple books that never got published. And I think that for people who are not published or hoping to be published, sometimes it just seems like it's only about a lightning strike or a lotto win. But, I think people need to just keep writing the books that are in them because you're training. I mean, you trained, so you had that kind of faded connection with your writers group, but it was waiting for you and unfolding because you had been doing the work. And, I, for one, am so glad you joined that writers group. And I love that advice. Like, make sure you love writing. Make sure you want to be a writer, not just an author.
Yeah. And I would, someone asked me that recently. Have you ever considered not writing? No. Even if it was not my job, if it ended tomorrow and I didn't get another publishing contract, I'm still writing. It's what I do. Yep. So I don't write for publication. I didn't write for publication for 20 years. Yeah. I write now for publication, but that may not be the case next month, next year, 5 years from now, who knows? It doesn't mean I'm going to stop. That's crazy to me. Like in my brain, that would be like, well, then what am I going to do? If I'm not doing that, I have to find another outlet or something.
Right. And you need to be writing because we don't want you working your rage or imagination out the way Lottie does.
Yeah,
I never would. I'm such a by the book Law and Order type of I don't know about Law and Order, but I'm such a I do everything right. I don't cut corners. I don't I'm too scared. I don't want to go to jail for anything. I would never
I feel like
do
most
anything
of us who
like
write batshit crazy books are. It's like, we'll just do it on the page.
I'm just going to imagine what it would be like to be a villain or a bad person, but I don't ever want to do anything.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to cast you as a potential serial killer, but you write one really well.
No. I don't even illegally park. Come on.
Well, it's good. You get it all out on the page, and then we can live very ordered, sane lives in our off time. It's wonderful. It's a great balance.
Well, this has been such a pleasure. Greg and I are huge fans, and we both loved all of your books, but Too Old for This is just awesome. So everyone listening needs to go buy it. Can you tell us where listeners can find you on social media, out in the world, if you have any events you want to promote?
Yeah, my website is samanthadowning.com, and there's links on there to social media. I'm mostly on Instagram or Facebook, and I'm not a TikToker. Sorry, I just can't do it. And I will be at BoucherCon this week in New Orleans, but I think this is airing next week, so it's probably already over by the time this airs. And that's all I have for now. So I don't have any other upcoming events at the moment.
All right. Well, I will
thank
take
you
us
so
out.
Much.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, for lending us your time.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Good. Good. We had a blast. And I'll look forward to seeing you at BoucherCon this weekend.
Yeah. Sounds great.
I will take us out briefly. Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg is created and hosted by us, Elizabeth Keenan and Greg Wands. The show is produced and edited by Bookwild Collective founder Kate Hergen. Scott Leeds composed our original theme music, and Steve Luoma designed our logo.
And you can find us on Instagram at Imposter Hour Podcast and online at imposterhour.com. Thanks again for listening.
Great mix of sad and angry. And I think that is embodies what this book is.
All right. Beautiful. Well, that seems like a great place to take us out for this. But Maris, thank you for spending some time with us. This was a wonderful conversation. We really appreciate it.
I love you both, and I miss you.
Me too.
We love you and miss you too. And everyone needs to buy I Want to Burn This Place Down. And where can people find you? What are you doing? How can they meet you? Tell us everything.
Yeah.